Okay, I'm making a follow-up video on Dr. Ruth E. Kastner's book, Understanding Our Unseen Reality, and this is about her mention of virtual photons, and it connects to the previous video I just did, talking about phase. And so she basically says that in quantum physics they're relying on the vector math as magnitude, but she says that in the relativistic quantum physics, the reverse time force as a virtual photon is from, so you can see here, I'm starting this chapter right here, is from phase and not magnitude. And she says that she's not gonna get into the mathematical details in this book. She does raise the, she gives the she says right here, okay, actually the repulsion is established by the phases rather than the magnitudes of the amplitudes of the scattered offers, but those details are beyond the scope of this book. So she's saying how, the electromagnetic force with the opposites attracting and same charges repulsing originates from virtual photons. And almost all physicists will insist that virtual photons are just a mathematical equation, and that virtual photons don't exist in reality. For example, the PBS space-time scientist Matt Dowd makes this claim that virtual photons don't exist, and also David Chester recently, he's a PhD physicist, and he recently said something along the same lines, that virtual photons don't exist. Now, the reason they're claiming this is because they're relying on the symmetric math of relativity, whereas Dr. Ruth Kastner has developed a relativistic quantum model from quantum physics, and she's building on the Louis de Broglie model, so that you have a reverse time and negative frequency based on the noncommutative phase, rather than the magnitude. So the magnitude math is from the vector analysis, and so you have to convert it to a commutative symmetric mathematics that in quantum physics is called the Poisson Bracket. And that's what Dirac always did, was that he converted it to a symmetric mathematics, whereas Dr. Ruth E. Kastner, along with the protege of Olivier Coste de Beauregard of Louis de Broglie, Olivier Coste de Beauregard, they both say that the paranormal is very possible because of the virtual photons. And Dr. Ruth E. Kastner gives the example of when you have static hair. When you get static hair, that's due to virtual photons causing the repulsion between your hair. And so the idea that virtual photons are not real has been disproven, because there was a recent laboratory experiment where they were able to convert virtual photons back into photons, and that experiment has been corroborated and repeated by a physicist who's on the Nobel Prize committee. And so the fact that scientists are still claiming that virtual photons are not real, that they don't exist, it has to do with the mathematics and the philosophy of the math, as Dr. Ruth E. Kastner points out, that classical physics assumes that the imaginary number in the complex mathematics has to be converted back into a real number magnitude, and that's done in quantum physics for the probability by the squaring. But what she's saying is that before you square the amplitude, you add what she calls the offers and the exchange. I don't know the term she uses, exchanges, or she calls them absorbers, and so that there's a reverse time signal that's a force, but it's not technically an energy, because energy has to be based on amplitude. So it's a force based on wavelength and frequency, and this is what Alain points out also. So it's a relativistic force as a reverse time and negative frequency, and even though it's virtual, it has a very real effect that eventually affects the probability of the actual particles that are measured from the symmetric mathematics after converting the complex imaginary numbers into the real magnitudes. So she does a really excellent job of explaining the mathematics and does it in a very like super simple way, but she doesn't use any jargon that makes it, that it makes it difficult to understand. And I've read tons of quantum physics books, and the reason I've read tons of them is because there's so much jargon, and you have to see the meaning behind all the different jargon used. So here she goes into the mathematics of. So here you have that's the complex numbers there. So that negative imaginary number, then it gets added together, and then you end up with a value of 6. So the 6 is when you add those two complex numbers together, the imaginary numbers cancel out. See, they subtract, and so then you just get a real magnitude. But what she's saying is that the imaginary numbers actually are the virtual photons that are having a real effect before they get turned into a probability. And of course, I haven't finished the book, but I'm just saying that if you read the book, then you get a better understanding of standard quantum physics, of the difference between adding the amplitudes versus multiplying the amplitudes for the probability. And what she's saying that is in standard quantum physics, they don't have a physical explanation for how the Born rule of squaring the amplitudes for the probability exists. And this is why you have the quantum measurement problem. And what Roger Penrose is saying is that it's due to the gravitational collapse that causes the measurement problem. And this is essentially the same as the relativistic quantum argument, is that the virtual photons are basically, they're also reverse time, and so there is a noncommutative primordial time, what Roger Penrose calls fundamental time, and Alain calls primitive time. And so it exists before space-time as a symmetric magnitude measurement. And this logical problem originates from the origin of Greek mathematics, when they converted wavelength of the lyre, the musical instrument, the lyre. They flipped it around and they converted the wavelength and frequency back into magnitude. And so you had a root tonic of 12, and it was flipped around to 6, and then the 6/8 was a 3/4 wavelength that then became the 4/3 frequency. But the 4/3 frequency has a different root tonic than the 6 and the 12, because the 3/4 is the wavelength, so that the frequency is not a harmonic of the root tonic of the 6, because the 3/4 of the wavelength would be the like the same as the overtone wavelength. So you have a 3/1 wavelength, or is the frequency, the wavelength would be 1/3. So when you have a 2/3 or a 3/2, you have a 2/3 frequency, you have a wavelength. The root tonic is not the same root tonic as a 3/2 wave frequency. So when they're flipped around, when you have an overtone of 4/3, that means that the frequency is the root tonic of 3 that doesn't go into the 1. And so even though you're using 6 and 12 as the numbers for the ratios, and 3 goes into 6, the converting it to 8 as the root tonic for a 4/3 frequency from a 3/4 wavelength of 6/8, the 8 is the 3 is not a it's not a it doesn't go into the root tonic of the 1 as a octave equivalence, since 3 doesn't go into 2. And so this is what then manifests in the scale mathematics. When you try to add together the fifths with the octave, is you get a uneven value. So you get 12, you get 19 fifths, because you're adding together the octave fifths plus the 7 of the scale from the original octaves, because you have to try to divide the fifths back into the same scale octave that's symmetric. And so when you do that, when you have to rely on the octave symmetry, then the 3, using the 3 as the root tonic, no longer aligns with the root tonic of the octave as a 1/2 value. And so by using the fundamental frequency as a double octave, as I just demonstrated in the last video, what they're doing is, for the harmonic series, is they're covering up the fact that the overtone series is based on listening, and when you listen, you can listen faster than the Fourier time frequency conversion, and therefore you're listening to the source of the one. It's a phase coherence that's non-commutative, and therefore it's a reverse time superluminal phase with a negative frequency as a quantum coherence that's non-local. And so you can actually listen to and absorb the virtual photons that then are the foundation of the electromagnetic force. And so I haven't finished Dr. Ruth E's Kastner book, and she said she wasn't able to read my paper yet because she's too swamped with her own stuff. But I have discussed this stuff with her a bit. Well, actually, I've discussed more about music with her, but and so I'm enjoying the book, and then she wrote a second book that I'll have to read also, and so a lot of this is just terminology because you can't use the word energy because of the mathematics, so you have to call it a force, which is you have to parse your way through the terminology, and so that's all I'm gonna say for now. Thanks.